Well, hello everyone. My name is Kristen Whitfield. I am with Control Bionics. I'm our clinical education specialist, and I'm here to talk with you a little bit about the NeuroNode Trilogy, some things that might be new, some tips, and some educational opportunities that we have. This is a short session, so I'm not going to do all the learning objectives and all that typically go along with the session, but I do want to ask, how many of you are familiar with the NeuroNode Trilogy? Okay, it looks like about half. So let me just tell you briefly, the NeuroNode Trilogy is our communication device that offers individuals the widest range of options for accessing communication. Eye gaze, scanning using the NeuroNode, and then a combination of eye gaze to look around and find the one you want, and the NeuroNode to select it. So the NeuroNode is a sensor that can be used two ways. The first is EMG technology, which means it's picking up on the electrical impulses that are associated with muscle movement or even the intention to move a muscle. I have this on my wrist. It's picking up on the muscle that's used for a little bit of finger flexion. I can also use it in what we call spatial mode, which basically just means a change in the position in space. So if someone has a little bit more movement, we can use that. If someone has less movement, we can pick up on the electrical activity, maybe of a smile, maybe of an eyebrow raise, or a bigger movement like what I'm going to demonstrate with today. And any of those activations then serves as a switch to operate my communication device. So during this session, I'm going to introduce you to a few features that can help to support efficient and effective communication, effective use of the communication device. For those of you who are somewhat familiar with the NeuroNode Trilogy, some of these features might be new to you, and so hopefully it will give you a few new ideas for increasing the flexibility and the usability for additional folks. So we're going to talk about these four features: profiles, the upper limit switch, second switch, and auto calibration. And I think when we get to auto calibration, I'm going to ask for a volunteer to come up and help me out. All right, I have a willing volunteer already. Awesome. So profiles are really no different than what you might assume when you hear the term profile. Within our application, our controller app, we can set up different configurations of settings. So let's say you have an individual who maybe takes meds in the middle of the day. So in the morning, their access is one way. In the afternoon, it might be a little different. Maybe they're up in their chair most of the day, but then they're in bed late afternoon, and they need slightly different settings. So we can save profiles, and that means there's fewer changes that have to manually be made each time we're changing their position. For an evaluation facility, it means I can try this with one person, save their settings, try it with another person, save their settings, and when they come back in, I just have to pull up the right profile, and it just saves a little bit of time. So let's go into the software. So what I'm showing you here is what we call the controller app, and it's just a piece of software that helps us get the NeuroNode set up specifically for one individual. Once we've set it up, we really don't look at this very much, but it gives us a way to help fine-tune the way the NeuroNode works. So profiles are easily accessible here, and I can save. I don't think we've tested the upper limit, or we've found the upper limit of how many profiles we can save. So I can have a variety of different things saved here. I am in spatial mode right now, so it's looking at changes in the position in space. But I'm going to change to this ATIA profile that I created earlier today. And we're going to talk a little bit about this concept of an upper limit switch. So historically with the NeuroNode, you can see that blue line on the screen. That is showing me the movement or the electrical activity associated with the movement. So if I make a small movement, as long as I get above the green and then come back below the amber, it considers that a switch. But what happens if we have someone maybe who has some tremors, maybe some seizure activity, and uncontrollably they make a huge movement? Do I want that to count as a switch and then start the scanning and pick something that I don't want? Probably not. So what we've done is put this upper limit switch in, which means if I have that big movement, it doesn't count it as a switch. So it kind of prevents that from causing problems that I don't really want or making selections that I don't really want. But if I do a small switch, it still counts that as a switch. So that's one neat feature that's relatively new on the NeuroNode. Something that's related is what we call a second switch. So let me make a couple of changes here in my software. First, I'm going to go to my second switch profile, and then I'm just going to make sure that it's set the way I want it. Yep, so it's set for a second switch. So what this means is that if I have an individual, and this is definitely not all individuals, but if I have an individual who can make that small movement and can make a bigger movement purposefully, then I can set this up potentially for two-switch scanning. So if I go into my grid software, I have my small movement set to move the cursor, and then I have the bigger movement set to activate it. So I'm going to do a small movement to move. I'm going to pick I love it. So I have to do a big movement here to pick that row. And then I can do, that was too big of a movement. So I'm going to do my small movements. To get here, now a big movement. Small movement. Big movement to select I love it. So even though I only have one switch site, one basic movement that an individual can do, I can actually use that as two switches for two-switch scanning. Not something that will work with everyone, but a great feature, especially for someone who continues to have issues with timing and hitting that switch at just the right time. All right, so one of the big questions that often comes up here is, how do I figure out how to set my controller app to find where to go for this activation, the switch on and then the switch off? How do I know how big to make that? And so that's where this idea of our auto calibration comes in. And auto calibration is basically a way that the system gives me a chance to make 3 movements, and then it will set the parameters, and I can at least get started. I can always come back in and adjust it. So I'm going to have my volunteer come up and give her a chance to try this. Oh. All right, tell me your name. Danette. All right, so Danette, I'm going to have you put this on either wrist. Which wrist?
This wrist.
Okay, so you turn it over, and I'm going to put it on this side. All right, so just to make sure that your movement is going to actually cause it to do something, I want you to move your index finger. Okay, so you can see the blue line coming up. It's not going up high enough necessarily to make a switch. So let's use our auto calibration to get it set properly.
You want me to do the same kind of movement?
Just same kind of movement, and it will tell you. It's going to do a little countdown, and then it'll say activate. So this 3, 2, 1 is just before it starts. And it'll give you another 3, 2, 1, and when it says activate, move your finger. Okay, and then it'll do it again, because it's going to get 3 trials of this. Okay? And then it'll do it one more time. Okay? All right, so now it's going to So now it's saying, all right, in these 3 trials, we figured this out. We're going to set the signal off at this and the signal on at that. And now we can just go back out here. Oop. Actually, it wants you to recalibrate. So each time it says activate, just do it one time.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes giving the right directions helps. Okay. And this is part of the reason we do this is because we want to make sure that the software is meeting the person where they're at instead of trying to tell the person change to meet what the software can do. All right, one more. Perfect. Now, it did not like that either.
Can I try to finger?
No, that's the right one, and you were getting activations here, so I think just do a figure, or just a faster movement. All right, so we're going to try it one more time. This is what happens when you do live demos. Sometimes they go right the 3rd time. So we're going to do that. Okay, so there we go.
Did it?
Yep, it's going to come. Okay. I'll give her one more time. Okay. All right, so this time it liked it. So we'll go out here, and what we should see is that our lines are in significantly different places than they were before. And so now it's set based on what she did. So I'm going to have you make that same movement. And it's now clearly going up above this on and then back below this off. So it gave us, the off is the amber line. The on is the green. And that red line up there, that's just my second switch line that I had up there from before.
So if I'm going halfway, I'm not turning it on.
Correct. These peaks are not being seen as switches because they have to go above the green line and then come back down below here. So I could say, oh, if it looks like consistently she's hitting in the middle here, I could just go in and adjust my signal on to be lower, and then she wouldn't have to go quite as high. So it's all very flexible based on the needs.
It's just in the calibration phase that you have to do that fast.
In the calibration phase, at least that's what it seemed like was working here.
Because some clients might not have that ability.
Right. So her point is some clients might not have the ability to do the same kind of movement. They might not be ones who could use that auto calibration feature, and other folks might be able to. But you don't have to do the auto calibration. It's just sometimes a nice way to get started. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Is the prize a NeuroNode?
She asked me if the prize was a NeuroNode. No. All right, so the last few minutes of this session, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some additional updates. One thing that we have found at Control Bionics is that while for a lot of individuals that NeuroNode Trilogy is the right solution, having access to eye gaze and the NeuroNode or the ability to use them together makes sense. But for some individuals, they're really only going to use scanning and the NeuroNode. So we do offer other variations of our products so that if it's not right to have all 3, our customers don't have to choose that. They can just do the NeuroNode and the communication device, or they could just do eye gaze and the communication device. Or for some folks, the Uno Touch, they could just use the touch device. So we have a full spectrum of options for our customers. towards the end of 2022, Control Bionics introduced 3 new page sets or grid sets. These are all built on Grid 3, and they are designed for auditory scanners. We know that there's a relatively large population of our users who need auditory scanning, and so we have created these 16 location page sets. The one in the middle here is geared towards individuals maybe with cortical visual impairment who need high contrast symbols. Some individuals maybe don't need those high contrast symbols, but they still need a fairly limited selection of vocabulary, whether that's single words, whether it's words that I can put together in sentences, whether it's complete messages. And then we have a version for folks who are literate. And those are all things that are easily downloadable from the Control Bionics website, and they work within Grid 3 software. Pardon me? They work on any Grid 3 software on any device. So we just happen to have them on our website because we developed them, but you can use them if you're using a different device that runs Grid 3. You can get them there. And the last part of the update is kind of my baby. It's what I'm most excited about, is our ability to offer speech pathologists ASHA CEUs. We're in the process of doing the same thing for OTs with the AOTA. And we have a growing list of courses that are recorded and available at any time, plus upcoming live courses. Jeremy, would you mind handing out those cards? It basically is this same card, so if you're interested, some of these are specific to Control Bionics or specific to Grid 3 software, but some of them, like Scanning 101 and Scanning 102, have tips that are useful for any communication device that offers scanning as an option. So we're trying to do a nice balance between specific and general AAC type of offerings. And that's all I have. If you have any questions, feel free to come up. I think it's easier to hear in this environment if you come on up, but I'd be happy to answer questions, or I'll be at our booth when we're finished as well. Thank you very much.